Hi, I'm Maria Sabin with the UT and TSU Extension for Hamilton County. Today in this meeting of the 4-H Gardening Club, we're going to look at plant propagation. We are also going to do an art project, and we've got a challenge for you for next time. Let's get started. First, we're going to look at our challenge from last time. Last month, we buried cotton underwear to see how fast the soil would break up the cotton. It was the Soil Your Undies challenge. We're leaving that underwear for 2 months, but let's check and see what happened after 1 month. This is 100% cotton underwear that I buried in my backyard, and I just dug it up after 1 month. You can see there are already some nice holes in it, and some weeds have started to grow roots through it, which means there'll be more holes soon. That means that soil has a pretty good rate of decomposition, and that is one measure of soil health. That means that plants will probably grow well in that soil. We'll check again after another month and see what our results are. For today, though, let's get started on learning about plant propagation. Propagation just means getting new plants from old ones. There are several different ways that you can propagate plants. One of the ways that most people know about is planting by seed. Most plants grow from seeds. Most of the time when it's nice and warm, you can just plant seeds outside in the garden. What about if it's not warm enough yet? Right now, it's early spring. If you go outside in the evenings, it's chilly. You still need a jacket. That means that it's too cold to grow plants like tomatoes and green peppers outside. What you can do, though, is start them inside from seed and let them grow into some nice seedlings and then transplant them outside when it's warm enough. To make that easier, you'll want to have a pot that will biodegrade in the soil. That way you don't have to remove the plant from the pot that you've been growing it in outside to transplant it. You can just bury it, pot and all. The pot will biodegrade away and the plant will grow outside when it's warm enough. We're going to make some paper pots today that you can use to do that. You can also get some pots at the store. There are peat pots that they sell, but it's a lot of fun to make your own. We're going to start on that. What you'll need for that is some newspaper or other paper. You'll need a tub or a bucket of some kind. You'll need some water. You'll need some cups or some muffin tins that you can make the paper pots in, and you'll need a pencil to poke some holes for drainage. First thing you're going to do is tear up the paper into little bitty pieces in your tub. If you have a shredder at home and if you have an adult to help, you can shred the paper in the shredder. That will be a really fast way to do it. Now, when I did this at home, I wound up with a lot more paper than I needed, but we have a fun art project to use the extra paper. Once you have your paper shredded into your bucket, add some water. You're going to let it sit in the water overnight so it gets a little bit soft, and then you really want to tear up the paper really well. One thing you can also do if you have an adult to help is to use a blender to actually blend up some of that paper that's a little softened. You want it into a nice paste. Once you have a nice goopy paste of the newspaper, you can add a little flour if you want to help it stick together better. I added about 1/2 cup of flour to my mixture, but you don't have to. Then you're going to put some of it into some cups or into some muffin tins and spread it out nicely. Make it as thin as you can without having any holes in it. You can use a muffin tin as a nice way to do that. You can use paper cups, you can use plastic cups. Spread it out nice and thin with your fingers or with a flat object such as a butter knife. Then you're going to want to be sure and poke a little hole in the bottom so that you have a drainage. Remember, we talked about having some extra paper mush afterwards. And what you can do with that is put it in some cookie cutters and make gifts for people. Add some flower seeds. If you put in some wildflower seeds and mix it up a little bit and put it in some cookie cutters, you'll have some pretty gifts to give people. You can use white paper to make it look more artistic. To dry your paper cups and your paper pots, you will want to put them outside if it's nice and warm and sunny. If it's not, you can ask an adult to help you put them in the oven at a low temperature. It was a very rainy week, the week that I made my paper pots. So I wound up actually putting them in the oven at 170 degrees. They dried out nicely that way, and I have some nice pots to use for our project today. Don't put your cookie cutter pieces into the oven though, because that might keep the seeds from sprouting later. So now we have some pots, and we've put some soil in them, and we're going to plant some seeds. How deep should you plant a seed? It depends on how big your seed is. You can see that the green pepper seed is a lot smaller than the pea seed. That means you're going to plant the sweet pea seed a lot deeper than the green pepper. In general, the rule is that you plant it to a depth that is about 2 to 3 times the width of the seed. So I have some green pepper seeds, and I'm going to plant them in a pot. I have soil, and I've put in a little bit of water, and you just barely poke them down just a little bit because they're not very big, and be sure they're covered up, and be sure that the soil stays nice and moist for a while. Once they sprout, they will put out 2 leaves that are called cotyledons. These are not true leaves, and it's not ready to be transplanted outside when it has the cotyledons. You want to wait until you see the actual true leaves. On the tomato plant, you can tell that the cotyledons and the true leaves look very different. Once it has true leaves, you can let it harden off outside, put your seedling out into the sun for a few hours each day in the week leading up to the time you want to transplant it. And then when it's warm enough, you can transplant it straight into your garden, pot and all. Another way that you can propagate plants is by stem cuttings. Some of the herbs are really good at propagation by stem cuttings. Rosemary and mint, for instance, work really well. So I've cut a piece of rosemary from a bush in my yard. You want to cut a piece that's about 4 to 6 inches from the new growth on the top. You're going to take the leaves off of the bottom couple of inches and just put it in some water. You want to leave it in the water for about 4 weeks. Change the water every few days to be sure it stays clean. Another way you can do that is to put your stem cutting into some really moist soil and cover it with some plastic. Be sure it doesn't push down on the stem cutting though. And after about 4 weeks, it should be ready to transplant. You should have about 1/2 inch long little roots that are ready to be transplanted at that point into your garden. So now we've learned about propagating by seed and by stem cutting. It's time for our challenge for this meeting. Our challenge for this meeting is to test some variables on plant growth. What's a variable, you may ask? A variable is something that changes. Right now we have 3 pots that are about the same size. They have about the same amount of soil in them, and all of the soil has been moistened. I'm going to put in some seeds into each one of them. Same kind of seeds, and I'm going to put in about 3 seeds in each pot. These things are all the same for each pot. That means they are constants in this experiment. Constants are things that don't change. Push them down just a little bit. Cover them up with a little bit of soil and be sure it stays nice and moist. Now, for the variables. We know that plants need light to grow. Let's test and see. We're going to be trying out growing these seedlings in different types of light. The light will vary, so it's called the variable for this experiment. You might try putting one plant into some nice artificial light from a light bulb in a room. Try putting one plant into a nice sunny window so it gets in some natural light from outside. And try putting one into a dark room with basically no light, maybe a closet corner. After 2 weeks, you'll see what happens. You'll see how did that variable affect the plant growth. You have a light variable lab sheet to fill out that you talk about, well, what happened with your experiment. You can draw pictures of what happened. Be sure and bring that to the next meeting. So I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next meeting of the 4-H Gardening Club. Bye-bye.